a week, but it's just good to see a little sunshine. I will go ahead and call our meeting to order. I know Ms. Harris isn't here. She did send me a note saying she ran into a little traffic, so I assume she'll be in shortly. That is, if she's not coming from Charlotte, no idea when that will be. So with that, we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order and ask if there are any adjustments to the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add an item. I'd like for us to take a few moments to discuss something we discussed, several months ago, and I don't know, in my mind, we kind of left hanging while we thought about it a little bit, but it concerns remote participation by council at official meetings and what will be allowed and not allowed, and put into a official form, up to and including. Well, I'll leave it at that.
All right.
Discuss it.
So if council will agree, we'll add that to under item number 1, items for discussion, remote participation. Any objection to adding that item? With that, then I'll ask staff if there are any other adjustments. Okay.
No, sir.
Is there a motion to adopt our agenda?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, motion is made that we adopt the agenda with the addition of one item for discussion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is made, receive a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Move on into general business. Items for discussion from council and self. I'll start with Mr. Now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Myself and Councilman Harris, George, and Town Manager Mr. Wyatt went up to Raleigh and we met with our State Senator, Vicky Sawyer, our Representative Jeff McNeely, and our Representative Mitchell Setzer, Jason Sane, and then we also had breakfast with Representative Gray Mills. And it was a very worthwhile trip going up there. We were able to spend some time, talk to them about things that we would like some money for and why we need it and whatnot. And they seemed very responsive to our needs. So it was, I think, good progress that myself, Ron, and George made up there. To actually sit down with them and spend some time and talking to them. And also, we met our lobbyists, Alex and Kevin. I'm very impressed with the job that they're doing up there in Raleigh to help us get some money. So hopefully, come June or July, we'll see the efforts of going up there and meeting with them. And I think it was very helpful that they could put a face with Troutman, and not that we've met them before, but and sit down and just talk to them. So I'm very, very impressed with what we did up there.
Great. Mr. Harris?
And I'll just second what he said about our trip to Raleigh. I think it was worthwhile for the town. I think we'll see something this year that'll be worthwhile for these trips. Work with our representatives, and I think that's what we need to do more of in the town. Also, I just let you know that thanks to Kim's help getting me signed into it, I attend with a Zoom meeting with the top 10 primer on land use, planning, and zoning for elected officials through UNC Charlotte, UNC Chapel Hill, to try to get more information on some of these things around planning and zoning that we keep hung up on. So it's a kind of interesting thing. I've got the notes with me that hopefully we can use it to go forward. So I did that. And the other one, the only other thing I'd just like to let the chief know that after seeing what happened in Memphis, you think that would never happen again. After George Floyd, see something happen, letting you know that we're standing here supporting you. If you see just additional training to make sure we never have that issue, because now we're getting more and more police officers, that we stand with you to whatever training you think these guys, just that extra piece they need. Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Archer?
Not much. I Congratulations to those that got to view the balloon as it crossed this weekend. I didn't get a good look at it, but saw that it was shot down over the ocean, I believe. But eager to hear if we have any more reports about what all that was about. I'd love to know personally. But other than that, saw that Morrisville PD did made a post about it on social media. Thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, other than that, just glad to see good weather. Glad to see it finally turn. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Hinkle?
I just wanted to piggyback on what Eddie said and thank him and George and our town manager for taking time to go to Raleigh and meet the representatives and our lobbyists as well, those who hopefully should be and will be representing the best interest of Troutman, and as you said, Eddie, putting a face to who they're representing in the town. And I also look forward to hopefully positive results coming out of that day and a half meeting. So thank you for doing that.
So again, let me say thanks to you all for taking the time out to go up and visit and spending that quality time in Raleigh. I will be and have been spending some time up there. So I couldn't make it when you guys were there, but I know in talking to Mr. Wyatt, there will be other opportunities for other council members to visit with our state legislatures and legislators, as well as other members of our legislature. I think it's great just to spend both in the office time and some out of the office time, just to let them get to know you and you get to know them a little bit more. It always adds up. It's one of those things where you can't really look at what the payoff is all at once, but by the end of the session, hopefully we'll start to see some fruit that come to bear. So again, that, like Mr. Hinkle, appreciate you all taking the time to go up there and do that. So I know there's quite a few things that will be discussed in this legislative session, so I'm sure we'll start to talk more about that as we go along. I don't really have anything as well, so we'll move on into staff items and turn it over to Mr. Wyatt.
First item we have for discussion is following proposed text amendments to the town's Unified Development Ordinance. We've got language there for stricter rules on mobile food trucks. That's been a lot of discussion that we've had numerous times over the years. Different feedback from council, and that is attached in on-street parking and construction standards for on-street parking. We'll be glad to answer any questions, and Lynn is here and has submitted that paperwork to you all.
Man, can you detail a little bit more of you know, said the construction people, construction industry, who is pushing for this street parking? A little bit more description of what's being asked for and who's asking for it, please.
I don't know that anyone's pushing for it, but we do get requests from builders, developers, to be able to utilize on-street parking in certain situations. Just a couple of examples. The apartments going in down by the charter school, a part of Home Improvement Boulevard is gonna run through their property, which will bisect the development. So they were asking if they could utilize on-street parking on that segment of the street, just kind of to add to their parking. But we looked at that, and even analyzing and looking at Home Improvement Boulevard as a whole, we know that that's gonna be a street that, as you know, is a reliever to Highway 21. but we don't want that to become a de facto freeway. We don't want there to be a high speed on that road. So on-street parking a lot of times is used as a traffic calming device. It tends to slow traffic down, especially in situations where we're trying to create more of a boulevard feel. So I felt like that would be, staff felt like that would be a good application of on-street parking. And then I think as we start to see, we created a language for mixed use zoning. We approved a mixed use project up at Barium. I think we're gonna see on-street parking applied there as well, especially in that village core or the mixed use sections happening, and you're trying to create that kind of downtown feel. So staff just felt like it was something that'd be kind of a nice tool to have in our toolbox, that we could pull out and use it when we needed it. So that's where this came from. We started getting those requests, and we realized we really didn't have anything in the UDO or the construction standards that would allow us to approve something like that. So we just wanted to bring that to you guys to see if it's something you're even interested in staff preparing language that you all could even consider.
Well, I didn't know that, there'd been a problem. I realize, we're talking, if you're talking just in building phases, something temporary. We're not talking, year after year in perpetuity. Something like that, I don't see a problem, providing them parking, but I thought they could do that anyhow. I mean, I go by a building site and I see, their cars out on the street as it is.
Yeah. This would be permanent on striped parking like you see in Uptown Charlotte, parallel parking spaces. So it'd be a cross section where you would have a sidewalk, a landscape strip, a row of parallel parking, your street, and probably a landscape median in the middle. So that's what we're looking at doing, is providing that cross section that we can give to a developer and say, this is how we want this road to look if you're gonna do permanent on-street parking, as part of your parking calculations. And the reason that we have to consider that is that paving width will become maintained by the town. So that's the reason we really wanted council to say, yes, we're okay with it. We, of course, would not suggest that type of application be applied, at exit 42 or on a major roadway like that. What we probably would do is go back and look at the UDO and decide what zoning districts it might fit, like mixed use, and even maybe make it part of our conditional zoning process when things are approved. The developer can ask for it and we can consider it on a case-by-case basis.
Would this be retroactive to existing streets?
Well, I think the cross-section would be there to use. It would be a tool, yes. And if you all decided, you know what, we're gonna do a project here on Eastway, we want on-street parking, we could pull that out and say, we've got something to use that shows us how to build that.
I mean, but we want to be very careful of that, because obviously, on-street parking, streets are for movement of traffic. And when you've got something parked, that does slow down, that does obviously, that's one of the purposes of it, but it also interferes too, and increases the likelihood of maybe a wreck, a fender bender or something, or something else. So I certainly want to make sure that the streets were appropriate, and that depending on how it was set up, if it was on both sides of the street, that the street would be wide enough to allow for traffic both ways, especially emergency vehicles, to get to where they want to go. If you have, traffic on this side and traffic on this side, and not enough in between.
And we would really rely on our engineers to help us create this cross-section so they could make sure, those are very good points, and we would want to make sure that those were all taken into consideration.
So this is something then that is not going to be just put out there and said, by right, you can do this. It's, you're proposing it to something that would be developed case by case, and roads built to handle that. And if it is retroactive to an existing street, the street would be modified to allow for that, where there would be ample width of the street to cover both on-street parking and flow of traffic in both directions.
It would have, or if it was, say, council decided that you all wanted to apply that to one of our town streets, you would have to make sure, the cross-section would ensure that the right-of-way width and all of those things were met, so yes, that's a yes.
Okay, so-
And if I can try to help clarify some also, with the terminology of retroactive, that's if we go back and make any improvements or declare those streets to meet the new UDO, some of them would have to be widened to accommodate.
Mhm.
So it's not retroactive, to answer your question in that sense. We're not gonna go back and start trying to acquire property and repave streets and redo curb and gutter so that they now comply with the new UDO. The purpose and intent of it is to make sure going forward, anybody builds, then it has to be to these standards because. And likewise, as Lynn pointed out, if you all decided for whatever reason, one particular street had issues with that and it needs to be corrected to meet the new UDO, then that's something we would have to have the engineers to go in and look at accrual of property, which to me can get very messy. And that's why I say it's not intended to be retroactive to where we're gonna go and do any street digging up and make repairs.
Or even, again, when I said, yeah, and I understand what you're saying, but also I wanna make sure that, you know, an existing street, it's allowed, to where the street now becomes, you know, kind of a little bit of a hazard to the traffic in both directions, without improving, and that sort of thing, that going, as you say, going forward, the street would be built to handle that, or if an existing street, it would be widened or changed, engineered, you know, improved to handle on-street as well as traffic moving in both directions safely.
Yes, sir, and to your point, I'll use West Avenue as an example. That street was built wide enough to have a lot of through traffic, even if somebody occasionally parked on the street. But we have other neighborhood streets that it's not wide enough for that type of activity, and that's why we've placed no parking signs in a lot of those areas.
And I just want to clarify one more thing too that I thought of when the manager was speaking. This is just an option. We have other cross sections in our ordinance for residential streets, commercial streets, so this would just be an option. So if streets are built, it would just be something that you all could consider using.
And as I understand your question, whatever it is, it's gonna come back before council, so we're not trying to solve for what you're asking for today.
Well, I think what we would do is we would put the cross-section, have that drafted and put that in our construction standards, and then the UDO language, from what I'm hearing you, I want it to be conditional, and we can do that. We can make it something that's allowed per council approval.
This is for dedicated.
Yes, I misunderstood you, I apologize. Yes, we'll be bringing the language back.
That's what I
I'm
wanna,
sorry.
that's
Yeah.
what I wanna
We'll take
understand.
it to the planning board and then we'll bring it to you.
Okay, so what you wanna hear from us is, do we have any interest in going
Correct.
through this
Yes, sir.
process
Yes,
to consider on-street parking?
Correct.
Okay.
And yeah, this is for dedicated, painted parking spots, correct?
Correct. Parallel parking is what we would be proposing.
They wouldn't all necessarily be painted, but we could make that if that's what
Oh.
council decides going
Oh,
forward.
no, I'm just looking to clarify, not
Yeah.
to, but, so like, because I'm maybe a little bit confused as well. Like you took West, all right, I think probably Councilman now can verify, can vouch, like, in our neighborhood in varying seasons, right? A lot of people park on the street, right? So is there maybe like a law or an ordinance that I'm not familiar with? Is this allowed? Is this not allowed?
It is allowed as there's not ever been before council for no parking to be allowed there. You all's HOA restrictions dealt with that differently, and quite frankly, some of these neighborhoods, the HOA has more severe penalty than we would as a town. But using some of those streets as an example, they're not wide enough to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish here going forward without somebody donating property and saying, here it is.
Okay, so just, I'm driving through Troutman, I wanna stop at a house. If there's not a no parking sign, I can park on the street?
Not necessarily, but most of them, that is correct. But like Main Street, for example, that's a state highway. So if it's a state highway, no parking's allowed on the street.
Sure.
If it's a town-owned street, parking is allowed unless there's signs up that prohibit it.
Okay.
And this would be, and I know we haven't really talked about this in great detail, but I think what we would be proposing would be the cross-section where we would have painted spots, because it would be more of an urban cross-section, that we probably wouldn't use it in a typical suburban residential neighborhood, but we might use it in Berrien, where you've got shopping and retail and mixed multifamily, where a higher density, where it might be like a Burkdale.
So again, just to give some direction to staff, anybody opposed to staff investigating on-street parking? Doesn't sound like that's,
My only question would be maybe to the chief, in your force's experience, is there anything that we may need to look at while this can's open, as far as when it comes to on-street parking?
No, I mean, you know, if you think like downtown Statesville, that's, you know, like kind of what they're talking about. When I worked there, there was no, you know, there were still rear-end collisions, but there weren't any collisions that were the result of the parking situation. I don't think it would present a hazard or, you know, create any issues for us.
Or any of our current ordinances maybe not doing what you need to do, or giving you the tools you need, or?
You know, well, you know, it depends, because we don't get a lot of complaints except in one area about people parking on the street.
Okay.
Let me just, with on-street parking within the town, you gotta be parking the way that the direction of the traffic is going, am I
Yes.
correct, chief?
Yes.
So you
And-
couldn't, like, if you were heading, you know, if your car was heading right up the road,
Yes.
somebody couldn't park the other way.
Yes, you have to be parked in the direction of traffic
Gotcha.
for that side of the road.
so, I think you've got some direction on that one. If we go back to the language for rules for mobile food trucks, any thoughts, comments on that language?
Under D, does that include a panel food truck? You know, you've got 1, 2, under 2, 2D.
I don't really know, what is I'm not sure I know what a panel food truck is.
Box truck.
Like a box truck?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I like Tony's. Tony's, you know, talked about that.
Yeah,
we consider
I
panel.
think that's the intent.
I mean, it's a storage, you know, it says storage, and obviously that, and I'll use that again, Tony's Taco, we're all familiar with that. Would that be considered, you know, a car, not a cart, but part of a storage unit?
I'm not sure. I'll have to, I mean, I think that was the intent, but if there's confusion, we can clarify that for sure.
And then at A, at 2A, you talked about a maximum of 3 months,
Yes.
so for a site and a calendar year. Is that like where his is up, it could sit there for 3 months, or?
Correct. He could stay at one location for 3 months in a calendar year. So Tony could locate at Food Lion for 3 months in 2023, and then he could not locate there again until next year. Now, that does not prohibit him from moving to a different site for 3 more months. If he could find a piece of property and get permission of the property owner, he could move to another location.
Is that normal for these types of ordinances?
We found that other jurisdictions in the area, that's how they're permitting these, yes.
Would that be a 24/7 thing, or would he have to move it at night?
I think that the way we have this written is he would have to move it per D, the one we were just speaking of. But they would have to remove them by the close of business each day.
Okay.
And then again, that's at council's discretion. If you think they should be able to leave them there 24/7, we can change that.
I read it, but I couldn't remember how you listen. Okay, so he would have to move it then at the end of the business day.
Does he move it now or does it stay there? I can't remember.
I believe he moves it now.
He does?
Mhm.
I was looking at G, so that means that they can't have a sign somewhere else that says Tony's is down here.
Right.
Right.
Which is something, honestly, I don't even know if we just put that in there just to reference, but our ordinance currently wouldn't allow that under our sign ordinance. Wouldn't allow an off-site sign.
Okay, 'cause I know a lot of them just have, not even necessarily like you're saying directionals, but like just right by the ordering window, they have a sandwich board.
Well, I
That
think
they
could do
change,
that.
yeah.
I think it's what from Ms. Harris was, or Councilmember Harris was referencing, is we wouldn't allow them to have an advertising sign elsewhere, sitting up at the front of the property, saying, Tony's Tacos.
There are a lot of food trucks that actually don't have brick and mortar restaurants.
Correct.
So how would we monitor whether or not they have a brick and mortar restaurant?
Well, I think,
And how do they fall under
well, I
all
think
these
that,
rules?
Well,
I think the intent of one is that if there's a restaurant in town, they have to be in the town of Troutman, and and they own a food truck, that if they're in the town, they can park that food truck on site. So if Randy's has a food truck, because a lot of restaurants use food trucks as catering businesses, they would be allowed to have that food truck there. I think another example is if the coffee shop wanted to have something that they operate, serve their own baked goods out in their patio area, they could do that. We didn't want to prohibit that from happening, so that would be that. And if it's a mobile food truck where they're not parking on their site, then they would have to come to us and get a temporary use permit. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
There would have to be a restaurant in town.
Right, so let's use the gas station on Old Mountain and 21, or let's use the car wash.
Yeah.
Occasionally, you do see some food trucks in there that aren't the gas stations or the car washes.
They would have to get a permit from the town, a temporary use
If
permit.
they did have one though, then they could get the permission of the owner of the property they're parking on and set up.
For 3 months, they could
3
stay
months.
there for 3 months.
Now, as far as the ownership, they would have to park, if they're doing business out of that food truck. And I'm not picking on Tony Taco, but everybody's so familiar with it, it's the best example. I presume do they still own the restaurant up here? So
It's listed
technically,
in two different business names, which would not follow the example of the Mexican restaurant has also a food truck that's parked out back. So it's different because they have it listed under two different business names.
And also, we have a requirement in here that if a restaurant does own a food truck, it can't sit out in the front yard of the
Right.
property.
so this would not come under that restaurant owning the food truck. then?
Correct.
Okay.
What if it's not a restaurant?
Well, we have under here, we have it listed, where is it? Food service business, restaurant, coffee shop, deli, ice cream shop, etc. So a coffee shop could have,
But it has to
food
be
truck.
food related.
Correct.
Well,
So in other words,
we, for the purpose of this, it's for food trucks. We have different ordinances that deal if somebody wanted to pull up in a pickup with a camper and start selling yard sale items out of it. So it's entirely different. This pertains particularly to food
Right.
and trying to accomplish what has been told to us before. If a restaurant owns a food truck, he or she can park that truck on their property. It's not in violation because they're not selling food out of it. But if they start selling food out of it, any business, all food trucks are supposed to be inspected by the health department, regardless, whether they have the brick and mortar restaurant themselves or they pay somebody else a fee to have that as their home kitchen. And once they have those permits, then they can come to the town and request a permit to sell any food item, prepackaged, cooked, whatever, and then that's when they get the permits to sell, as long as they have property owner's permission wherever they go.
Okay. Yeah, we've been talking about the one down here. I'm thinking about the one down here, where it's like, it's the same owner, but I think it'd probably fall under what you said, because it's probably two different business names.
Could be.
Do we have a fee schedule?
I believe we currently already have a fee for.
I didn't know if that would apply to this
temporary use
ordinance
permits.
or not.
But yes, they would apply for a temporary use permit. We do have a fee already on our fee schedule. I believe it's $150, but I can double check that. But that's already something we already have, because we issue these for other uses.
Do you think we need to look at that fee, maybe? You're talking up to 3 months, is that adequate?
Well,
I mean, I'm just asking.
I honestly can't answer. I've not compared other locations and see what they charge, and as Lynn can tell you, and even Adam in Public Works, most of our fees we have looked at to make sure we're in line. I do recall the discussion going back 6 years on this topic. I do not think we were in line, if my memory serves me correct, but that was the will of the council at the time, that said leave it at this fee. But again, without us verifying what other towns are charging, I simply can't tell you that $150 is enough. I don't know.
And obviously it's a different council now, so they
Yes.
get a different answer.
Yes,
So my request would be, and if we approve this, would you folks check, make sure we are in, close proximity to other surrounding communities, and if we're low, we catch up.
the The one thing I will add, just for discussion, most small towns that we checked into do not have rules or restrictions. They just don't. But again, around close to our proximity, most everybody does. And without verifying, I'd be wrong to say, yeah, we're this much low or we're close. I honestly just do not know.
We're not 20 minutes from the next town. We're kind of
Okay.
sandwiched by two.
That's right.
Well, again, I'll leave my request there, if you would check, and if determined, however you wanna, handle that, come back to us and ask us, for a change in fee.
And
Yes, sir.
just as a suggestion, if I may, we're moving into budget cycle. I know it's a good time then to just look at all of our development fees, which
Okay.
if you wanted to just roll it into that, I'd be happy to do that and present it as part of the budget cycle as well.
I just wanna make sure we're covering the cost at the very least. At the very least, we're covering the cost.
Yeah, go ahead.
When would this take effect, if it's approved?
Well, it'll be immediate, once council adopts it. So we
Because then
would,
the calendar year would start whenever we
immediately.
implement this new,
We would probably need to give, some time to notify our current food
Right.
truck users of the new ordinance. I think that's something we would need to kind of talk about how we wanted to handle that. But yes, once it goes before planning board and you all as council adopt it, the ordinance is immediate. But then we can kind of decide how we want to handle that transition and getting that information out, which we would begin doing immediately.
one more question. The fairgrounds, it's in our town. So the fair that comes in for 2 weeks or whatever the amount of time it is, do they have to apply then for a permit through our town?
They,
Well,
they should by our ordinances, but they have not been.
well, they probably, yeah, it just depends on how long they're there, because I did take into account special events, because I know we here in the park, we have special events, and there's food trucks that come and locate here occasionally on a weekend. And we didn't want to, put those people at a disadvantage. So we made those people, if they're here for less than 2 days or less, no more than 2 days, then they're exempt.
So the fair is more than 2 days.
Then they would need
So
to
they
come
would have to
get
come to the
permits.
town of
Yes,
Troutman
is the
and get a permit.
Correct. But if there's a part, party in the park going on and there's a
Right.
food truck there, they're exempt.
14 days is a lot longer than 3 parties in the parks.
Is there what would constitute, I guess what would be the low bar for a special event?
I mean, I know that there's HOAs that do food truck Fridays. I think that would be something that we would not want to require them to get a permit for.
That's just, I'm saying, what's the special event threshold? What, as opposed to just saying, Jerry wants to, blow $1,000 on a food truck, have it in front of his house. Is that a special event? So.
I mean, I think that they're designed for things, that's a good question. I don't know that we've defined that, but I think it's meant for things like the park, for HOAs that are doing these at their swim
Yeah.
tennis, for the
I mean,
pool opening.
I'm talking about a lightning strike.
And
This
this-
parade, we've had
Yes.
several.
And let me just elaborate, being she brought up HOA deciding they want to do that. Again, if it impacts traffic, it's illegal because they have not done the things that they need to. And so many think that Jerry can blow $1,000 and have a hot dog food truck or tacos for a child's birthday party. It cannot impede the flow of traffic on a public street. But if they choose to have something in the common area, for example, that's permissible with the current standards. But we have had many and have had a few complaints because whoever decided to have a birthday party, instead of grilling out themselves, hire a food truck, that would actually be an example of an illegal situation.
So, a couple of questions, Lynn. One is, for example, the fair, events at the fairground should be requesting some type of permit from the town when those events occur. So if the horse show comes, are they coming to the town for some type of special use permit?
That they should, unless you all decide you wanna write it in here that the fairgrounds is exempt. But they should, yes.
So if they're coming for a special use permit, and they've been grandfathered in, let's just say, I don't know how many days the horse show is. Is it more than 2 days? So,
It's typically a full week, start, finish, minimum, a full week.
and so all the vendors that generally come to that, food vendors, up to this point have not gotten a special use permit. Is that
That's correct.
That is correct.
Again, something to think about. I would not want us to kind of squash what's happened. Mr. Now brought up the fair, the special uses that occur where they get a special use permit from the town. Maybe there's some exemption that we need to think about building in that. Again, that's just my perspective. Again, if you've got the fair up there, it's been going on for as long as I've been born, and there's been some type of food vendors there, to then start to say, okay, every one of those vendors have to, going forward, pay $150 or $200, whatever it is we decide on. I just think we need to think through that before we put that out there.
And to add to, also to try to attempt to answer Councilman Oxer's question, what qualifies as a special event? I'll have to go back and look, but I think our current ordinance requires everybody to do permits for special event if it's, I think it's 50 people or more. If it's expected to have 50 people, that wouldn't matter if it's at your house.
Right.
If you're having an event with 50 or more people, you're supposed to go through this event application process. It has been going through our Parks and Rec as an event, and then depending on what the event is, it may wind up at the police department, it may wind up at Public Works to also, because depending on the size, alcohol permits, different things of that nature, everything triggers something else. So, but off the top of my head, I think that was any gathering
Okay.
of 50 or more people outside, because we had some person say, well, what about churches? Okay, it's a church. You know, they're allowed to do activities on their property, and it's a church.
Okay.
But if
No,
they're
that's-
gonna block down a whole street like one does, they fill out the application and it comes before the town to be considered.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to be, wondering if we actually had anything on the books of what defines a special event, even if, without knowing the specifics, knowing it's theirs. That's all I needed to know.
So my other question really is around the permit that the food trucks get from, I think particularly from the county. Is the town responsible for enforcing those permits to ensure that they have the appropriate permit?
You're talking about the environmental health permits that they get?
Yeah, correct.
We are requiring that they provide proof that they comply with that as part of the application process.
But as far as us going to check it and enforce it, no, sir, we have not been. That's a county jurisdiction.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Can I ask, just on the sidebar, going back to this fee schedule a second, if you have someone, more than 2 days, say 5 days, versus someone's 3 months max, do we prorate that fee? How are we handling that? A few days versus a month or 2 months, what? Do we prorate that? Or?
We currently do not, no. A temporary use permit is a single fee, a flat fee.
Flat fee. So again, 5 days, 3 months, same thing. Okay.
And again, obviously, we got different council, but going back to previous councils, that was their will, is here's the fee, and it did not verify, it did not alleviate. So to me, we certainly can find, once we do research on what fees are charged, I would assume most people have that, this many usage, but we've got to be careful how we do that, because Duck's Hot Dogs, for example, sets up, who's going to go and click a card and say, okay, that was the 11th time, now he's triggered into a new fee. That's why most of them historically charge so much for a year or so much for this period of time, and that's where the breakdown gets changed. So if you're buying a month permit and they're gonna be here 2 or 3 days, or a weekly permit, 2 or 3 days that week, then they don't come back no more, and if they do, they've gotta have another permit. But if Josh's hot dog shows up and he's gonna be here every week, he may choose to go ahead and buy the whole year permit versus Duck just getting one. And I think that's how we can, once we do our homework, can say, here's options for you all to consider.
Makes sense.
Ron? So there's a 3-month permit, and then there's, like, if I set up in Food Line parking lot, and I'm there for 3 months, now I gotta go after my 3 months. But my $150 permit is a yearly permit, am I correct?
I think they're quarterly, I'm not positive.
Well, but actually, the fee is for the permit. So when we issue the permit, you pay the fee. So if you came, at least that's how we're currently doing temporary uses. Whereas if you came and applied for a temporary use permit, you'd pay the fee, and then you came back, applied for another one, you would have to repay the fee.
What if I left Food Line parking lot and went to where the car wash is, as long as I got permission? I'd have to apply after 30 days?
There'd be a new permit.
3 months, I mean.
Correct.
A new, so I have to pay technically another $150.
Yes,
Gotcha. So every 3 months, it's another $150.
because they'd have to come, they'd have to fill out an application form, they'd have to provide us with that proof that they have permission to be at that location.
Gotcha.
But 3 months is the max per
That's-
year.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
you brought up, and all of a sudden I went,
Yeah.
okay, you can only stay there 3 months, and then you gotta pay a new one.
So that I'm clear, this is not what we will see, still gotta go through the process before approval. Council will get a shot at looking at the final.
That is correct. We'll take this to planning board and then bring it to council for a public hearing.
Anybody opposed to looking at stricter rules for mobile food trucks? Next item, Mr. Wyatt, I believe, request for discussion on remote participation.
As we've discussed before, and we can get down a rabbit hole real quick today, and I don't know that it's necessary for us to get into it today, other than if there's specific things that you all would like for us to consider, and making sure that it's there. Off the top of my head and not having it with me, for example, the county commissioners allow remote participation on a regular basis. However, if a commissioner misses more than 2 meetings, it takes the vote of the rest of the council to authorize in a year. More than 2 in a year, it takes the vote of the rest of the commissioners to allow that. They allow normal business remote participation by phone or Zoom, and a person can vote as in normal business. Gary, not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think when we last discussed it, from Gary's point of view, he was not certain that that was permissible in the way he interpreted the statutes, and is that a fair statement?
Yeah, the statutes indicate for a quorum and the vote, you have to be present. And the county commissioners, that policy also says that if the vote, they can vote if the vote doesn't count. So let's say that you have a 3-2 vote, if the third vote is remote, that can't pass because of the third, because they're the deciding vote.
That's where I think we defer a little bit in advising you all. I interpret, and one of the commissioners I spoke to, their vote does count. It's just if somebody was to complain, they've got 30 days by statute to state a grievance, and then at their next meeting, they bring it up. Now, historically, there's one that I'm aware of, they postponed because of that remote participation. But yes, I left out that key part that Gary pointed out. Even with remote participation, there still has to be a physical quorum present, meaning if 3 or more of you all wasn't here, you couldn't do it. And I agree 100% with that. I guess that's where our difference of opinion is, in speaking with folks I spoke to at School of Government, if you have a quorum present, the only thing that can be challenged is somebody vote. As to Gary's example, if it's a 3-2 vote. Nobody's real clear from the School of Government, two different people that I had consulted with previous that said, well, they actually went, just like Gary and I, two different opinions as to what could happen. The simple remedy to that situation would be if somebody did complain, so wait a minute, it passed 3-2 and this one person was there, they could challenge that vote, not the vote of the entire council. But that does, in fact, say, okay, the vote's in question possibly, and then it would simply be heard at the next meeting again. And that was the folks I talked to. The other part of theirs that I think is key, and again, even though I don't think what was legal when the governor put in the order that said, okay, remote participation's great, closed session or open session, nobody ever challenged that. And it's like everything else. If you don't challenge it, then it is what it is. But the closed sessions is where it's more of a, not even a gray area to me. I agree with our town attorney. I think we agree on this point that in a closed session, a person could not vote in the closed session by remote means. That one's off limits. But it would be you all's pleasure whether or not you even wanted to allow that person to listen by phone or watching Zoom, and the argument there gets is, well, you don't know who's in the background. But to the point I made to you all, it didn't matter for 2 years when Governor Cooper said it was okay. Why is it going to be an issue now unless somebody challenged it and it goes through the courts? Because there is no law that has been decided that says it has to be this way or it has to be that way. It's interpretation of the statutes that makes that not just straightforward. Is that a fair way of saying it here? It's just not clear. Now, again, he has his interpretation. So does attorneys I've also talked to in the School of Government.
So that I'm clear, during the state of emergency, where the governor allowed remote participation, did we draft our own?
That's when we wrote out.
Okay.
And I will say, the governor issued his edict, and about a month later, the legislature enacted it as a statute. So the emergency, I think it's 160C, 166C, something like that, is now the statute that says when you have an emergency, you can have remote participation. That's only under emergencies.
Under a state of emergency by the governor.
Well, you as the mayor can declare a town emergency and it can still qualify.
That's why I'm asking. I just wanted clarification.
That you want to declare an emergency?
Yeah, at any point in time, you know.
Let's test it out.
Yeah.
Fire away, Mr. Mayor.
So I guess, at least for me, council can chime in here, but I'd like to see maybe present that back to the council. Let us take a look at it for next month and.
Well, I had written a policy. It was really just a modification.
Yeah.
I know Paul had it, and I've got a file that's back in my office.
Okay.
I know it's gonna come up, but I can send that back out.
Yeah,
as a draft.
I think that'd be fine. We can go back through it and take a look at it.
Yeah, that was part of it. I mean, I've got all this paperwork, and of course, Duck's emails, copies, all that, and I was just reading that not too long ago, and we discussed it, but just kind of left hanging, and to address the closed session thing, normally we don't vote in closed session.
Correct.
So if someone is listening in, if I'm listening in to a closed session, and I engage in conversation or participate verbally, when we go out of closed session, will I be able to vote then as a result of that discussion of the closed session? We wouldn't be necessarily, technically in closed session then. And also the majority, the 3-2 thing that we were talking about, if that vote is disallowed, well, if it's a situation to where within 30 days, somebody wasted the 30th day to lodge a complaint, well, in the meantime, we voted for someone it's okay for you to do this, and they've started doing it, in that, 4-week period, and then all of a sudden, they find out that, hey, that vote's not allowed, we're gonna have to re-vote. And that vote doesn't go through, well, that person has maybe spent money doing something within just those few weeks, while someone has not challenged it to the just very last. I hope I'm being clear in mud when I'm using that example, but it could result in an embarrassment, I'll put it that way, a costly one.
I agree with you, and I think, again, not trying to put words in Gary's mouth, because I understand his posture on or position on the thing. One of the things that it can be done in those situations, two things that can be done in those situations per school of government. One, we vote for this, but we're allowing somebody to wait 30 days and see. And then two, the mayor can cast his vote if he so chooses. And if that makes it 4-2, the one off the phone does not matter at that point. So they can appeal all they want. But if the worst case scenario, if the mayor cast his vote and that made it 3-3, then that certainly becomes wait 30 days for it to take effect and see. If not, 3-2 would carry.
Okay, all right.
So again, we'll just send that back around and we'll take a look at it and try to put it on our agenda for next month.
You want it back on the agenda, briefing agenda?
Yes. All right, we'll move on down to town manager staff comments. Mr. Wyatt?
I won't take a lot of time reiterating what was already stated. I will just add that the legislature's invited us back several more times and encouraged future visits, not only from those of us that were there, but the rest of council also. The old saying is, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's pretty much was, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So whichever way you want to take it, but they did encourage that we follow up with several more visits. Emily had a picture taken thing for Valentine's yesterday. I think I'm gonna mess up, I'm not trying to quote her, but using her words, it turned out to be hugely successful. There was volunteer photographers that came in and do it. Lisa Crates was the one. Sorry, I don't know the other lady's name that showed up to do these things with backdrops. And as Emily stated, it was probably the most diverse event that we've had other than parades, as far as folks coming out, all ages and various restraints to where they couldn't normally participate in certain things. Several canines also made it in for the pictures as well. I would also like to comment and piggyback on Councilman Harris when he was talking about our police. Law enforcement this day and time continues to come under national scrutiny for isolated incidents. Our police department is performing the best they have. To our knowledge, we're getting the positive feedback from the community, and that's direct correlation to what Chief Watson is doing with the training that is already in place and mandatory training that he's putting the officers through. The rest of staff are performing their jobs admirably as well. And I would just like another opportunity to thank them all. One thing I would like to remind you all, some of us got the direct emails. I think the clerk forwarded it out at least twice now. On February 22nd from 9 a.m. to 12 is the essentials of transportation planning and land use. I think that's always, if your schedules allow, regardless of how long we've been doing it, seeing certain people from DOT, seeing other folks that's there on Lake Norman Transportation, on the Charlotte Regional Transportation, all of those will be there, and it helps us all to be better. If you have time, please register. If not, contact the clerk and she can get you registered. And I would like to, in addition, to say, if you all haven't been in the park the last week, they started actually about a week and a half ago. Our part-time crew is working on our dugout covers and structures. That project's come along well. The planning house next door, as Lynn says, they beaten hammers all day today making racket. But should be by our meeting Thursday. That house should be painted and also have the vinyl trims. We still have windows that have to be done in that, and honestly do not know the date for that. And I would like to say we also got a permit finally after almost a year from Iredell County to move forward with Wagner Street building. We had done all we could do without having proper permits in place, and we finally got those issued with that new program that they have up there on permitting. It's like a lot of new programs. You just run into some hiccups and things here. There's no individual that has done anything wrong at the county. We appreciate our working relationship with them. It's just that program makes things a little bit difficult until they can get all the kinks worked out of it. It's the best way of saying that. Would you not agree, Lynn?
Definitely.
But once it is working the way it was supposed to be designed working, everybody will be much appreciated. I know we will when that happens. And that's all I have to add at this point.
We'll move on down to next item.
I have one question. The first item you mentioned, was that on the 22nd?
Yes, sir.
The town and state, is that what it is, the town and state dinner? With the league?
It's transportation dinner. It's in Mooresville.
What you're talking about is in Raleigh, this is in Morrisville.
I'm not sure I got that email.
I've sent out several over, you may have not gotten them, but anyhow, invitations and so forth, and so is Kim. You might want to check back, but at any rate, yeah, if you can be there, I would ask you to be there. I think you would learn a lot. Anybody.
Nuts and bolts.
Yeah, yes, sir,
Yeah.
yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, it's like
Mr. Mayor?
22nd.
Yeah, so now,
One question, if I could just ask Ron. Our sign, any update with trying to contact that guy or finding the guy, or
He's been served
do
with
we got
lawsuit.
the steel bracelets of justice on them yet?
Our attorney has made sure that the lawsuit was served. Unless he received something today, we've not received a response. We have met with another sign company that has done numerous signs around Iredell County for various groups, whether it be the school system, fire departments, rescue squad. Lou did due diligence and checking to see like remote, because that sign's down there and our office is here. It is considered to be a remote sign, and made sure to ask a list of questions to those folks that had remote signs, and they're satisfactory and work and all that. We have ordered the sign. It'll take somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 weeks, because the sign we're going back is a standard size sign before it comes in, and then they'll schedule installation after that. But as far as the guy that has done us wrong, he's been served his lawsuit.
He has until, I think it's somewhere around February 20th to file a response.
Thank you.
So we're, again, basically starting square one, new sign, obviously new installers, but new sign, everything, okay.
Yes. Also, one of the things I left out, if I may, Lynn and I have talked several times, in addition to this nuts and bolts training that I think is advantageous to everyone, we have also discussed the need of having a class for our planning and zoning board, possibly even board of adjustments in a different class, because it's two different things they have to consider that goes before them. Sometimes it's the same project, but there's different things that each board is responsible on its decision-making process. I had been in touch with an attorney that used to be the attorney for Mooresville, hoping that he would, and he simply with his schedule can't, but he's provided a name and number of a different person who does this, and we look forward sometime in the spring of having class opportunities available. When it is, of course, council will be invited to that as well. Our intent is to try to do 2 time frames, understanding that our volunteers on the planning and zoning, some of them still work full-time, but everybody can't attend an evening meeting, and we'll just try to coordinate what's best for the majority. Hopefully it's all, but if not, it'll be the majority.
Mr. Town Manager, can we emphasize to these folks that, as I think when this was done before, years ago, the response was less than admirable, shall we say, or enthusiastic. This is 4-year time. And I'd like to emphasize to these folks that this is not just something we're doing for an exercise, that this is important, you know, whether it's the BOA or the P&Z, you know, to please attend 1 or 2 or whatever can be worked out, that they need to attend at least one of these training sessions, that this is not optional. You know, now how far, what we want to do, if someone says, I'm not going, and do what you got to do, then we'll have to decide what we're going to do there. But I would at least like to impress on these people that they are expected to attend, if you have 2, one or the other.
And I appreciate that. I will only add, when we ask for who would be interested and who would, there was only 1, might have been 2 responses out of the whole planning and zoning board that they even wanted or needed training. So I appreciate your response, and we'd be glad to spell it out that way.
It wouldn't be unheard of to make it mandatory, right?
It's not
There's things that we all had to do.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I'm gonna make a statement, those who think they don't need it, probably the ones that need it the worst, or the most, I should say, the most. So I'm gonna respectfully say, you know, yeah, I'm gonna respectfully say, you may not think you need it, but you're probably the one that needs it the most. So I like to say, let's emphasize, and those who absolutely refuse will just have to make a decision what to do at that point. But
Yeah,
at
so let's
least,
exempt the 2 that said they'd be interested and force the rest.
but having been to both, I mean, God bless our volunteers, you know, and I don't mean this in any mean-spirited way towards them, but we all can stand training, and you know, even for us to be up here, we've been to training several times in some cases. So you know, we're not asking them to do something we haven't done. But I think it's very important on both boards, BNA and P&Z, to at least attend 1 training session.
Yes, sir. The next thing we have is an overview of council's upcoming February 9th meeting. Block 1 is called to order, the normal things that we do. Section 2, 1, approval of last month's meeting minutes. 2, approve the closed session minutes. 3, approval of regular meeting minutes. 4, approval of budget amendments. Justin is here if you've got any questions. Building reuse grant expenditure to CR Andrew. And just to explain that for the public's consumption that may be watching or observing, that was a grant that we filed for on behalf of CR Andrew, and an expansion they're doing that requires certain things to be in place before it qualifies. The state issued the grant, however, they only issue it to municipalities. When they put it into our direct deposit, it went into the wrong fund. Why they did that, I don't know. So it's just simple accounting procedures as to what that is. I want to say it was about 2 weeks ago, I took Mr. Tom on through to check, and he's already received it. This is simply doing accounting cleanup procedures. Anything you want to add to that, Justin?
No, you explained it well. It's just, we're putting the budget amendment to record the revenue and record the expenditure. So we're just the messenger of the money.
Also, the next one is proceeds from the sale of the police trailer and PD activities. Those are self-explanatory. We sold them, and now we need to make that adjustment in the budget. Is there any specific questions y'all have on that?
Do we not need a police trailer, or have you got a new one, or what,
The trailer basically was used, came from the Governor's Highway Safety Grant. It was used just to store stuff in. It got moved once a year, down to, National Night Out. And the weight on the trailer, was heavier than most of our vehicles could pull. So we really didn't, we weren't using it. And it was just sitting there and, so we felt it'd be better to just get, sell it, instead of keeping an item that we're not using.
We have talked about replacing the trailer at some point in time. Hopefully, we can get a donation from a local business that may do that for us. But at this point, as the chief explained, even if we could use it, we had two vehicles that are getting ready to be aged out, are the only one of the two could actually pull it. And it just simply was not practical to keep. And with the equipment prices being what they were, it made sense to sell it sooner than later.
Okay.
5 is approval of ordinance titled American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. Justin?
So this ordinance, since we received, we're under the threshold of 10 million. If you receive 10 million or more of these funds, obviously you have a much stricter guideline you have to follow, but we're under the threshold, so this ordinance is simply to just spend that money. That way it frees it up for whatever we see fit to use it for. So those funds are currently sitting in our ARP fund account in the bank, but by doing this ordinance and spending it on salaries, now we can transfer it to our regular checking account or to an investment account or wherever.
You
What's
say
the
something?
amount?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
What's the amount?
$882,473. That was our total. We got half last year and half this year.
Now, you say for salaries, I mean, we talking just regular salaries going forward? or-
Everybody's getting bonuses.
I mean, I was going to ask you.
No. So, I just went through and from July 1 of last summer, 2022 through December 31st of 2022. I mean, obviously our salaries for everybody was much larger than that, but we can spend that money towards those salaries. So recoup the money from what we've already spent.
It's almost like a state endorsed loophole, right?
It
So
kind-
that's how it's explained to me.
It kind of is, and we've had discussions with numerous others, and the training that first come out said you can only spend it this way or you can only spend it that way, and I expressed to other managers that's not correct. You can use it for these, and these, and they even argued, no. But then the government come back and said, yeah, you can, but because we got less than $1 million, we're not tied to any restriction whatsoever to how it has to be. The others that got 20 and 30 million, they still got to follow the latest guidelines that interpretations are getting made more clear as time goes by, I guess is the best way of explaining that.
Can I ask the logic? I mean, it's one of the reasons I asked, because when you said, I'm trying to take money out of any staff's pocket.
Yeah.
But if this is just going to continue to pay regular salaries, that's going to be there anyhow, with or without this money, is there a reason we're doing this instead of putting it in infrastructure, capital?
Yes, this
Can-
frees up the money to use it for infrastructure without any kind
Well,
of.
I'm misunderstanding. I thought you were talking about salaries here now.
Well, yes, that was to spend, this ordinance is to spend that money, so you have this money sitting in an ARP account right now. So by doing this, we move this money to our regular checking account or wherever.
Right.
Now we can spend that money for whatever we want.
But if we say in salaries, you've already approved a salary amount, well, now we're gonna have a lot more money left in salaries at the end of the year that can be used for other things.
Okay, infrastructure.
They say, oh, you get this amount, you can spend it on your salary. So that same amount that you planned on, had
Yeah.
set aside for salaries, you
Right.
now spend on whatever you want. So it's
Yeah.
kinda like a,
Yeah.
We could have done this
And
ordinance.
obviously, tell, I'm focused on infrastructure.
Right.
So, you know, that's why
we
it
could
keeps
have-
coming out.
We could have done the ordinance to specifically state, we're gonna spend it on this project, but then you have a whole set of rules you have to follow. By doing this, you can still spend that money on whatever you want, but now there's no rules.
Okay.
I mean, outside of the regular.
Yeah.
But it has to get shifted from pot to pot before it can be spent.
Correct.
Okay, that's the reason I was asking. I want to
Yes.
make sure that no staff member says that Paul Hinkle's up there trying to take a bonus away
No,
from
no,
us or something. I
no,
mean,
sir.
you know,
And
no,
for
that's
the
not what
record,
I'm
all
doing.
jokes aside, no, we have not, and we're not asking or expecting that to be the case, because I can hear the taxpayers now, well, Doug said, but that was in jest.
I was gonna say it, I was gonna let you say it.
It was in jest, nobody, we
Yeah.
did art fund bonus, I wanna say it was November, December, of 21, but no other municipality that I'm aware of. The only reason it may have been January 22 now to say that, but the only reason we did is everybody around us had already done it, and
Right.
we was the last one.
Right.
But nobody has done it this year, and they have used funds appropriately to adjust other things.
Okay. All right.
Any more questions on that one? And then number 6, ordinance amending the town Troutman Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10 Environment, Article 2 Noise, Division 1 Generally, and Division 2 Amplified Sound, adding language that provides for the ability to regulate and measure noise disturbances. We really don't get a lot of complaints in this area, but it's like when one source or one nuisance shows up, then certain people wear the phone out in that case. And again, as I told you all when we first discussed it, I could sit on the front porch of my house and listen to the DJ and music being played at Chickadee Farms. Because hopefully you all decide to pass this, because it allows our police with the appropriate devices to go out if indeed if I were to be that person that called and said, I can hear this, it's 10 o'clock at night, I don't like it. They just turn the meter on, and if it qualifies in that decibel level, then it would be, well, that one wouldn't be because it's in the county, but if it's in-town limits causing the noise or disturbance, then that gives them justification to then go and charge someone or tell them to refrain or you will be charged. But just because they hear these noises does not mean they're going to automatically be illegal. And that's what I'm really worried about with us. If you all pass the ordinance, then a lot of folks are going to now think, okay, it's going to be noise-free. It's not. Life is going to continue. People still going to play music in their garages. It's still okay, unless it reaches a certain level. That's when it becomes illegal.
do we need to, under Division 1, Part B, right where it talks about these things, right? It says, the following acts, among others, are declared to be loud, disturbing, annoying, and unnecessary noise in violation of this section, but this enumeration shall not be deemed to be exclusive, which of course means, I understand that. But, again, maybe I need a legal interpretation. I'll read that as these following things are declared to be in violation.
First page.
Yes, first page, Division 1, Part B, where it says, it's actually the verbiage in Part B itself without going through the subsections, right? The following acts are declared to be loud and ... in violation of this section. Right, so that means if I hear it.
I think that, yeah, they have to be loud, but then you'd still have to meet the decibels.
Right, that's just what I want to be sure that that's,
Right.
you know, that's, because I would read this, oh, well, if I hear a horn, that's been deemed to be, you know, in violation of this. But just like you're saying, that doesn't mean, right, that's, I just want to
We
make sure
could
that's clear.
specifically put bongo drum playing is illegal, but if it don't make that noise barrier, then
Okay,
it's not illegal.
maybe I just didn't read far enough.
Yeah, like honking your car horn, for instance. you know, there's already a state motor vehicle law statute against unnecessary use of the horn. But,
I'm sorry, Josh, what'd you say?
there's already a state statute against unnecessary use of horn, but, you know, you're allowed to use your horn for warning or as you're
Yeah.
overtaking something. So if they're honking a car horn, even if it's over the decibel reading, but they're using it for the purpose of, as a warning, then it's still legal, yeah.
And a perfect example is a fire truck. Well, it's a fire truck.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in my mind, like, I wouldn't want this to get published, right, and then have somebody read it, and then like using that logic that I just tried to explain, like, oh, well, number 3 says pets. All right, every time I hear a dog barking, I'm calling town hall.
That's exactly.
That's what
the
I want
point-
to avoid.
That's exactly the point that I say I'm apprehensive about.
Okay, all right.
Even in passing this, there's some people that will assume if they hear that barking dog, I call every time. Well, dogs bark. If it is continuous at 2 a.m. in the morning and an exterior dog, it may rise to the level, depending on how loud it is, that it would be a violation. But just because somebody's dog barked, it's not, if the noise is not continuing for police to measure it, there's nothing they can do. And I mean, that's just the fact of life.
Yeah.
If somebody can be playing music loud for 2 minutes, but by the time the police get there, if there's no music, it's not a noise violation. They can't measure it at that point.
It almost feels like to me like maybe section C and section B should be swapped. Let's discuss the decibel readings before we get into the examples kind of deal. I don't know, I just.
So on page 8, you left blank on, ones that have these, noise violations, you left, how many exceeding, years before the ordinance goes into place? You will have that completed for Thursday?
I think Lynn wanted to discuss that with y'all, that's why we left it blank.
Yeah.
We'll fill it in and have it ready for Thursday night.
That was a comment that Mr. Hinkle had made. I think if you wanna
Yeah, give an
chat
example.
about that.
Well, if and this is more for clarity, and also, if a business does have,
An alarm. You talking about the businesses with the alarm?
well, the alarm, or, using the one down in Mooresville where they had the, out on Highway 150, 152, where they had the excessive, compressed air, talked about in the EDC meeting and so forth a couple of years ago, and it was upsetting, I think, Cherry Grove neighborhood area and so forth. So it could be anything, but again, if this is existing now, and it's violating, or it would violate if we approve this revised ordinance, noise ordinance, it would violate that we grandfather it for a certain amount of time, that we just don't continuously allow it in perpetuity, that they would have a reasonable length of time, a couple of years or so, to correct that situation, which, again, using that example down in Mooresville, those folks, my understanding is, the manufacturer, the owner of the plant down there did eventually muffle the sound, run underground or something, muffle the sound to where it's now acceptable to the surrounding neighbors in general. So it's something to where I thought if you have business with an existing violation, if we, again, it's legal now, but would not be under the new, that we would grandfather it, but it would be grandfathered for a certain amount of time, so it's just not allowed on and on and on.
Well,
You're specifically talking about equipment.
Yes, equipment. Now, the burglar alarm was something else that Lynn and I also talked about, but here, talking about an existing business with an existing noise that will be in violation if we pass this, that are we going to allow it to continue in perpetuity, or are we going to at some point say, you've got to correct that, you've got 2 years, you've got 3 years, you've got 4 years to do it.
So, like at Walmart, when the citizens were saying that alarm is going off, it's for their employees to switch shifts or something?
But it's not a continuous.
It's not a continuous buzzing or anything, but it's a very loud sound.
Yeah.
That's exempted in the,
That's
already
exempted already.
exempted in the ordinance by, that's, something to, give notice of time to begin or stop work.
You remember the old Cherry Factory whistle? go from the border. That would be legal under an exception here because it's intermittent and it's to notify, lunch, time to start work, time to quit work, and it's not continuous, and it's, certain designated time. So if I'm understanding correctly, the Walmart would be, even under the new, would be allowed unless it's just continuous. And I think that's the best word is if continuous as opposed to intermittent for a definite purpose. Again, like I say, like the old chair factory situation, time to go to work, time to leave work, lunch.
Do we have any business that fall under this category now?
I would say that it depends on what type they work, but just in hearing Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem Hinkle speak out loud, I can think of air ratchets, for example. Anybody that's in town doing the automotive business, if they're outside using an air ratchet, it certainly could be, but again, to me, it goes back to the common sense thing. Even though that's what they do while they're working, it's not like they're out there for a half hour just running the air ratchet. They may take 5 or 6 lug nuts off of a wheel and move on.
Right.
That's kind of along the lines of my question is these, and your point, these pre-existing ones, I mean, could we maybe land ourselves in some sticky situations if we've, approved the site plan and conditions or whatever and said, yes, you can have your business, and now we come along and change the rules?
And to me, and trying to discern what's trying to be accomplished versus what's there, until we have an issue, we don't know. But I'm
Right.
not aware of any, the chief has been made aware of any that would fall in that category.
Seems real murky to me, because like I say, how do we show that it's been, because we just now got the equipment. So how can we say that it's, well, this is the decibel level it's been for 10 years, so yeah, we're gonna give you 2, or we can't even say that. We kind of hear it when we stand over here.
But it's not unheard of to put, in some instances, a limitation on grandfathering clauses. That's, not necessarily illegal. Obviously, you've got to be reasonable about it. I think any court would have to use that term. And, I know in construction things and, that's been brought up. And you can grandfather something in perpetuity, as I keep saying, and or put years. And that's why I'm not saying weeks or days or months, but years for this to be fixed. And like I say, you've got the situation out here in Mooresville that was discussed in economic development as an example of an industry that had a noise that was bothering the surrounding area. It was quite loud and it was persistent, and they did grandfather it eventually and worked it out and so forth. So I mean, that's just one example, and it was certainly loud. It was not the concern was not blocked by, well, you too bad. I'm sure the plant owner would have used that possibly as a legal defense rather than spend the money to muffle it.
To echo to what he's saying, I had one resident to complain the school bus every morning when it's backing up to turn around, they hear this school bus beep, beep, beep. By decimal level, it probably is illegal, but it's a transportation vehicle that's doing what it does. The only thing I can think of, worst case scenario, in dealing with what we already have, is somebody trying to say, like I said, they're interpreting, oh, I can't hear these rackets. Again, going back to common sense, it has to be persistent, continuous. So even like trash trucks that start at 5 in the morning, they're making that racket. When they slam that bucket down, it's a racket. But they've been doing it ever since they've been running around in Troutman.
And we don't get complaints on that. I can say, we do not receive a lot of noise complaints here. It's not a big issue.
Well, we're trying to change that for you. So.
Yes.
So that we can move on, would council be beneficial to putting, again, say it's a 5-year limit here. For the sake of this conversation, we can debate it or whatever, but 5 years here with some language around any exemptions would have to come before the council.
I might mention one thing, paragraph F is already in there. And it gives flexibility to the city manager and the chief of police to work with the people to try to voluntarily get it corrected. So, I mean, that's what happened in Mooresville. The city and economic development got together and they got the plant to modify their structure. So they did that voluntarily, and that's what F allows. So if you had a business that was not in compliance, manager and the police chief could go down and say, here's our ordinance, here's the problem, but this needs to get modified. And I think that should take care of any problem that you would have.
Well, but if you have a hard, you-know-what, manager or something that says, go pound salt, can we not put some sort of limit? The mayor says 5, I'm good with that. I just don't want it to be, forever, shall we say. Something in there that.
Yes, you can. And I also mentioned, if you've ever used one of these decibel meters, you would be amazed how much noise you can have before it violates. For instance, I had a case down here, River City Marino, where they were playing music and the neighbors were complaining about it. And you could stand out on the street with a decibel meter and it wouldn't hardly register.
Right.
Even though it's, hardcore rock and roll bands.
Right.
A vacuum cleaner in your house probably would, if you're standing beside it, probably would not violate these decibel meters. So these are substantial readings.
Yes.
So I just mentioned that, but yeah, if you want to put some kind of out for something that's already been existing, you can do that.
Well, 5 years, I mean, the mayor says 5, and that's fine. I'm not trying to be onerous or, put an undue hardship on any existing business in town. So if 5 years, my goodness, 5 years, I would think it's considered reasonable to give someone to come in compliance.
Anybody got an issue with 5? You need less? Okay.
60 decibels.
Okay. All right. That's right, I think we're on recognitions.
We will recognize Troutman Middle School Bobcats cheerleading team for winning the county cheer classic. Several of those folks will be here for our recognition. And then on 8, old business, annexation request of Shin Farms to be annexed into our town limits. Number 9 is the rezoning quest that follows. As we had a lengthy discussion about our previous ETJ areas, then we can consider the project first. If they're not, we have to consider the annexation request first. School of Government is saying that we can, just do not make the decision final before that you hear like if we heard the project and then considered annexation, and I'll have to get that to you exactly how they said it, but I'll send that to you tomorrow. And I just got the information today. And Gary and I spoke briefly about it, and as did Lynn and I. We are still, I think the majority of us are still under the interpretation, if it is not land to meet the statute that we have zoning authority over, that to be clearly safe, we hear the annexation first. But I will send that out to you all, but both of them are on there that way. The way we have always done the business is the way they're listed. Is there any questions or comments? I'll move on.
So Ron, when you say hear the project first, are you saying do the rezoning first, or just hear about the project before we move forward with annexation or rezoning?
As all of council rightfully so had concerns of, we don't want to put landowners in the position that they're going to have to pay in-town tax rates in an annexation and then turn around and deny the project possibly. And trying to make sure that we're still legal, that was my question, just like you said, Mayor, is can we hear the rezoning request first? And the answer was yes, but off the top of my head, and I apologize, I don't have the written documents with me, School of Government's interpretation is you can hear the rezoning first, but not vote on it. That was the caveat, not vote on it, but you can hear the rezoning, delay that, then go back and do the annexation up or down. That way you at least have facts in your mind of, okay, now this is something, if I vote yes on annexation, then most likely you've already heard that presentation, then you're gonna go with a similar vote on that. But that was their recommendation that says, yes, you could hear it, but not make that vote final on the rezoning.
That way everybody gets to say their piece.
Yes, and nobody can say we did harm or injustice, or they didn't get a fair bite at the apple.
Right.
Gary, do you have any opinion on what I just said?
Well, what you would do is just open it up, have the public hearing, and then, you would just delay, you just wouldn't have a vote, and you'd go back and do the annexation. I mean, so for instance, Charlotte never votes on the night of public hearing on a rezoning. It's always a different night. So it's the same kind of thing.
So it's not, if you open the public hearing, you open the public hearing, close the public hearing,
And then you could go back to the annexation and open that public hearing and close the public hearing, and then vote on the annexation. Problem there is, I don't know how you forecast
Exactly,
what your vote's gonna be.
exactly. You still go ahead and annex and say,
Still the same
I want that
result.
property tax, I'm gonna vote them, I'm gonna annex them, and then turn around and say, nope, I don't want that big box building there or whatever, and nope, no
You certainly
zoning.
could do that, but
yeah.
I think this prohibits us from getting in, just like my manager notes used to say, I recommend or I didn't recommend. Without hearing the case, it's not fair to either side if I'm recommending anything. So that's why, just like here, there's no recommendation one way or the other. But if we are trying to get as much information as possible before an annexation is decided, this is the legal way of doing it that may help persons decide, okay, now I'm gonna be in favor of or against the annexation. Yes, they certainly could still change their mind, but knowing the ramifications of that, unless it was a mean-spirited person that was not looking for the overall benefits, if it's no, it's no. If it's yes, it's yes.
but any individual can still come in and request an annexation without requesting a rezoning.
Yes, sir. And they can still request, if they're in our ETJ, rezoning without annexation.
Are there any safeguards on the applicant side for the bad scenario we're discussing, where we annex but then deny the project?
No, that's.
It seems like in the past I remember some people making it contingent, the annexation contingent on the, is that?
They've tried to, but you
Yeah.
can't do that legally.
Right.
Okay.
You can't do that legally. It's either, if they're in our ETJ, we can annex without changing, we can change the zoning without annexing. But if they're not in our ETJ, we don't have a legal right to decide zoning in any scenario. If it's not in our ETJ or in our town limits, we cannot decide yea or nay. You can hear the facts.
So that was my question, is then can we even entertain that discussion?
Yes, you can hear the facts, but you did not make your decision until it
Yeah.
was legal to do so.
Gotcha.
And when we annex, we do have to assign it a zoning classification. So even if whoever brings the annexation request doesn't have a site plan or a concept plan, we have to give it a zoning designation
And,
and assign it.
and some of these projects, you get real creative then, worst case scenario, you heard the project, you hear the annexation request, you vote yes on annexation, but if they decide the rezoning or whatever's there before you, you still have within 30 days that you have to give it that zoning classification of something. So to me, that would open up council to more scrutiny and or liability. For example, if it's a housing project that's being requested and then you denied it, what zoning are you gonna give it if you took it in on the annexation?
And my understanding is if you don't make a decision, then it's automatically rezoned whatever the applicant has requested.
Correct,
If they request a housing development
correct,
and we don't make a decision, then it automatically in the 30 days, as you say,
correct.
becomes housing development zoning, whatever it is.
Yes.
I understand.
Do we make that designation, or is that something that would come from the planning department?
You all should make the designation, but we recommend based off of applicant request that it does or it don't meet, and that's up to you all to decide, but you all are required to give it its zoning designation. That's why I'm saying, just being devil's advocate, absolutely worst case scenario, it goes back to, like Lynn said, the statute is, okay, you still gotta,
But sounds like the majority of the heat falls on the council. I mean, I think that's the way it should be, so.
well, I respectfully disagree with that.
Okay.
Is the staff has done its homework based off of previous criteria that you all have told us to do. And if it meets the land use plan and it does all these things, then all staff can do is say, we vetted it and everything is in order. That don't mean that you always have to accept it. That's one reason why one of our neighbors has been sued about 9 times and lost every time, is because they did not go with what they had said is okay. Council can certainly vote ever how they choose, but if it's not following the guidelines that are there, and if staff does not do its job appropriately to make sure that all your questions are answered, which is what our role is a supporting role to make sure that all those facts are there. If staff recommends denial, that don't mean you have to. If we recommend approval, that don't mean you have to. But if one side of the grieving parties decide to pursue it later, then that may give them substance. If we are not doing our job correctly, and that some staffs have been sued because they didn't say, here's the appropriate facts. But to me, and I'm not trying to make it mundane, to me, you all's choice is simple at that point. If it meets all the criteria, it's a no-brainer, regardless of which side that is. If it don't meet the criteria, it don't. Anything else on that?
This isn't gonna get deferred, is it?
Sir?
It's not gonna get deferred, is it?
The reason it got deferred last time is we had requests of sports facilities in there, and they were trying to get answers to, there's huge power lines that cannot be used for a lot of things, and we had made the request that they allow sports fields, baseball fields in particular. And what they discovered that you all will hear is they've got information on that. They still are willing to donate a pocket park, if you will, to us that we have to pay for and build, but they're at least donating the land. What we choose to do with it would be up to us, but that's the only reason it was deferred the last time, is they was trying to get those answers of, can we build under the lines or off to the right of the lines and still accomplish what everybody's desire is or was.
Jerry, I invite you maybe to, if you have a chance, the next 2 days before Thursday night, get with the town manager. George and I were part of a little get-together the other day with the developer on that, because obviously it was 2 of us, can you do 3? Sure. And he did ask about getting with the rest of you, and
Yes.
he did ask. So I don't want you to feel like you've been left out, but if you have questions, because what George and I saw was beneficial. It was deferral, but I think, if it goes through and it's an option that, if we want it, we can take it, and we can refuse it. And they'll return to the developer, and they'll develop it or do what they want with it. But get with him, you, Felina, Eddie, and talk to him, and he can explain to you, the results. So it's about an hour's meeting, but it's a good meeting, and so, I hate it was deferred, go ahead and get it over with, but it was for a good reason. And so, just to make you aware of it.
Sure thing. Thank you.
And they certainly are. If there's a time before we leave tonight, you Council Lady Harris and Councilman now let Lynn know what times work best for you all. We can have two of you there. The third one, depending on the mayor's schedule, is welcome to come, or staff will be present, but.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out. When I said town manager, you and the town manager, I didn't mean to leave you out.
Well, I just put the work on her plate, that's all. And then we get, was there anything else?
No, thank you.
Then we get to the public comment period, and that'll conclude.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Did we have an overrun?
Just for clarification, Mr. Mayor, clerk asked, are we changing this on the agenda? And just so everybody, the order of those two, I would not recommend that we do that. I would leave the order as it is because it needs to be handled in that order. But we can certainly say, before we get to the annexation request, and that's you all's pleasure if you choose to do that at the time. But we can change it on the agenda if you prefer.
Would that, but just basically constitute moving 8B down? Is that really what the debate is here?
Yes. 8B would be the last thing if you all choose to do it that way, yes, sir.
I would argue that keep it legal, we keep it in this order, and council's just smart enough to, somebody keep me honest and offer that maybe we can hold a public hearing on the rezoning first. Is there an issue with that, council?
So move 9A up as
No.
opposed to,
No, leave it as it
8A
is.
is first.
Yeah,
hold the public hearing on the rezoning
correct.
8A's first,
before,
then postpone, and then hear 9 in its
Annexation.
entirety,
Correct.
except no vote. Did that make sense, Councilman Lockyer?
yes, yes.
Open 8A up, and then postpone it with a proper motion, and then hear all of 9 except for the final vote.
Okay.
That's good for me. All right. As long as that's, yeah, that's clean, then that's good for me.
Any other question or comment for the good of the
Oh.
order?
Oh, if I may, Mr. Mayor, the clerk just reminded me,
Yeah, I'm glad for the clerk.
well, sometimes she reminds me, sometimes I remind her, so it balances depending on what day of the week it is. We started a program, this past month to recognize employees, as an employee of the month. And being candid with you all, we've got great employees. You all comment on that you see and or hear from citizens on a regular basis, as do I. We've got some that just seem to shine a little better than others from time to time. And what we have incorporated, I talked to several of the department directors, and we came up with doing an employee of the month. And with you all's permission, if you don't tell me, then I'll go back and correct it. But the only thing we can really do to reward that employee for being such is, we have started having potluck to where everybody brings or volunteers something, Friday lunches before this week of council meetings. That way we get to further discuss, is there anything we forgot or didn't put in the agenda? She didn't tell me Friday, she told me today. But we also recognize that employee at that day as to, hey, here was our employee of the month. They will get 4 hours off for being the employee of the month, paid 4 hours off, and that's it. One employee can be nominated all 12 times, or can receive it all 12 times. It is not gonna be one of those, everybody gets an award thing. That's why one person can get it all 12 months. And at the end of the year, based off of things that I collect from the department heads, and all department heads help make this choice, at the end of the year, it'll be my final decision as to who the employee of the year was, or a different process if one's developed by then. But for right now, it's the intention that I would take all the monthly ones and then choose from that based off of what was recommended when they got it. So this coming, Thursday, wherever you all would like to have it in your agenda, we would like to add that we're gonna recognize Mark Jewett as our January Employee of the Month. And feel free to tell us where you prefer it fall,
I think
under
it makes
3?
sense. Yeah, under 3.
Make it 7A? Or you wanna renumber everything else?
I can renumber, whichever,
it's in your
renumber.
number, yeah.
Okay.
What's it gonna be?
Number 8.
It'll be 8,
8?
after the Bobcats are recognized.
He has to attend the meeting.
Sir?
He's gotta attend the meeting.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because we discussed Friday, we've got some employees who love working for the public, but they don't necessarily want to be in the spotlight of attending the meeting. So if we have an employee that chooses not, we'll still make you all aware of who it was, but there may be some, and some have childcare, for example, that there's a reason why they couldn't attend it. So it's not just they don't want to come and see you.
Well, it's work related, do they clock in, or, yeah, I think it gets, yeah. If they wanna come, by all means, please, but not required.
Right.
So that I'm clear, use it or lose it, the 4 hours for the month,
Correct.
in the month in which it was apported.
It'd be the next month. He got it, but yes, you're correct. We're saying the same thing. He was notified Friday, so he gets this month to use the 4 hours. I will say part of the reason why he got it, and Gary's gonna cringe when I say this part. One of his supervisors showed up and said, "Hey, it's 5:30. He was washing the town dump truck, washing it out. He said, "Hey, it's 5:30. You supposed to done been clocked out and gone." He said, "I did clock out, but this truck's got to be clean." And several times he's goes at home at lunch, and instead of taking his full hour lunch, he's researching videos on how to make our pumps be rebuilt and or work better, more proficient. So he's definitely one of those, I understand my work hours, but I can volunteer my time just like any other citizen. Like I say, I'm sure Gary.
I'm not gonna comment. And Lou's not here, so I won't comment either. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay.
I'll make a motion with your.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition, please stay here